right, welcome everybody to this week's Rising Tide Foundation lecture. And I think a lot of people here have probably seen Phil and or his brother deliver lectures to the Rising Tide Foundation over the past year and a half or so. I'm always blown away every time I listen to Phil write or speak or show himself in an interview. His sensitivity to the deeper epistemological undercurrents shaping world's history, as well as this Gnostic sort of black magic perversion of reality that's tainted so much potential and undermined so much goodness, is really good. I mean, it's just very few people have a nose for this sort of material and this type of investigation. Phil and his collaborator brother have developed quite the sense of the bloodhound, of the moral bloodhound, and have been able to zero in on the structures of evil over the centuries. So, for those who don't yet have Invoking the Beyond, this giant tome, wonderful giant tome written by Phil and his brother. I'm going to make a link to this and his other book, an updated The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, available in the description box once this video is made public. Until then, Phil has done some interesting work, has developed some great insights about the substructure, intellectually, metaphysically, of what was being deployed when people went into a lockstep modality and were corralled into giving up a lot of their freedoms for the sake of the promise of some security. So I don't have to say more about that. I think we're all initiated. I'm just seeing people in the waiting room. I have to let in 1 second. And so, like usual, after Phil has done his main remarks, we're going to open up for some dialogue. And like usual, ask people to put their name in the description box or put up your digital hand, and I'll call upon you. And until then, Phil, the stage is all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. My presentation is going to deal with the theocratic roots of the COVID pandemic response. The working title for the presentation was American Sociocracy, Comte, Fauci, and the Enshrinement of a New Priesthood. And largely what it will deal with is the sociological impact of the pandemic response. I'll deal with some of the the more technical details surrounding the pandemic, but I'm only going to faintly touch upon them. I'm not going to touch upon them in any great depth. This is going to largely deal with the sociological impact of the pandemic response. But from 2020 to 2022, humanity was subjected to a veritable hell on earth in the form of draconian lockdowns, curfews, and quarantines. We all know, we were all there, we all experienced it. Ostensibly, such measures were implemented to mitigate the deleterious public health impact of COVID-19. Yet several researchers and activists from both ends of the political spectrum, both left and right, have contended that the pandemic response was actually an exercise in the radical restructuring of society. The emergent societal model that was being ushered in was one that subordinated democratic institutions to a coterie of experts. This contention gains more traction when one considers the annoyingly prolific veneration of so-called experts during the global coronavirus outbreak. People were admonished to, quote unquote, listen to the experts, their nagging and unanswered questions notwithstanding. But such uncritical deference to so-called experts echoes the normative claims of globalist theoretician H.G. Wells, who advanced the concept of a democracy of expertise. Wells envisioned a global society where exclusively scientific and technical knowledge informed the decision-making processes of governance. And Wells referred to the possessors of such knowledge as samurai in his novel, The Modern Utopia. Now, arguably, the coronavirus era of human history witnessed the actual incarnation of the samurai in the form of individuals like Francis Collins, Peter Hotez, Bill Gates, and most significantly, Anthony Fauci. All of these science are to some extent hostile toward democratic systems because such systems tended to confound their arbitrary edicts by advancing the sacrosanctity of individual liberties and the adjudicatory primacy of representative bodies, for example, parliaments, congresses, etc. Human freedom, which had played a historical role in the advancement of society, was suddenly conflated with suicide in the name of reducing the spread of a respiratory malady with a survival rate of over 99%. Individual liberties and the democratic institutions that protected them had to be abandoned. At least that was the rationale that we were given. But such anti-democratic sentiments were on display during a talk delivered by Anthony Fauci at the Washington National on November 12, 2020. Fauci stated, and I'll quote, "I was talking with my UK colleagues who are saying the UK is similar to where we are now because each of our countries have that independent spirit. I can understand but now is the time to do what you're told," close quote. Fauci also acknowledged that scientists were increasingly being perceived as authoritarian during the pandemic and that unfortunately science, quote, has been lumped into politics, unquote. Ironically, Fauci tacitly endorsed his own preferred political system while simultaneously promoting the divorce of science from politics. The political system for which Fauci expressed a circumspect affinity closely resembled the so-called democracy of expertise advanced by Wells. It was, in a word, technocracy. In classical political terms, technocracy is the appellation assigned to a system of governance wherein technical and scientific experts rule by virtue of their specialized knowledge. These experts occupy lofty positions in economic and political institutions because they allegedly possess exclusive insights concerning the operations of the natural order. Ominously enough, aspects of technocracy began to be insinuated into the American system with the barely concealed approval of Fauci. Now, from whence came this autocratic mentality and why was it so pronounced among so-called men of science during the pandemic? Well, such autocratic thinking was likely symptomatic of a soteriological elitism, which in turn stemmed from a religious exaltation of science. Fauci exemplified this sort of religious exaltation in a March 2020 email exchange wherein he wrote, quote, "I genuflect to no one but science," unquote. Of course, genuflection is an act of worship. Why offer up such a reverential gesture to science? Science, well, as it is understood by Fauci and men like Fauci, it's no longer a method by which the natural world can be apprehended. Instead, it is regarded as a kind of secret knowledge that is more congruent with the ancient Gnostic concept of gnosis. On ancient Gnostic epistemology, only an elite few could ever dream of grasping gnosis, that is to say, secret knowledge. And in the antique era, that secret knowledge typically concerned the alleged inauthenticity of the external world and one's consubstantiality with the divine. Meanwhile, the rest of the vulgar masses remained hopelessly ignorant. Following from this epistemic elitism was a distinctly Manichaean anthropology, appropriating a spiritual binary invoked by St. Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 14 to 15. The Gnostics partitioned humanity off into the categories of the the spiritual man, and the psyche-koi, or that is to say, the natural man, where St. Paul intended these categories to represent mutable spiritual orientations that warred within all of humanity. All of us had the psyche-koi and the pneumatikoi within us, and they warred within us. The Gnostics advanced these categories as immutable soteriological statuses. The pneumatikoi were the elect, while the psyche-koi were the damned. no metanoia, that is to say, repentance or transformative experience, was possible for the damned. In the case of Fauci, one identifies the same procession from epistemic elitism to soteriological elitism. The particular variety of epistemic elitism to which Fauci adheres is scientism, the belief that the investigational methods of the natural sciences can be universally applied to all fields of inquiry. Scientism holds that the natural sciences provide the only legitimate hermeneutical keys for understanding the world and reality. It is, in short, epistemological imperialism. Through the prism of an exclusively scientific outlook, all forms of knowledge that cannot be derived through the quantitative and empirical methods of the natural sciences are regarded as unreliable at best or illusory at worst. So philosophical, metaphysical, and religious claims are automatically dismissed because they cannot be scientifically apprehended. In short, science is deemed the sole path to truth. Now, this claim to universal competence is confronted by a significant question. Are the natural sciences the only means by which knowledge in any field can be sought? Again, the natural sciences must concern themselves only with what is quantifiably and empirically demonstrable. Such epistemic constraints raise questions about the universal competence of the natural sciences. There are several things that cannot be scientifically proven, but are perfectly rational to accept. For instance, metaphysical truths. Such as the authenticity of the external world or the existence of minds apart from our own, cannot be scientifically proven. Nevertheless, they are perfectly rational beliefs to hold. This is especially true for the which is the chief of scientific research. Mathematical and logical truths, those cannot be proven by the natural sciences. These truths are presupposed by the natural sciences. Therefore, attempts to prove them scientifically are just fruitless exercises in circular argumentation. Ethical beliefs cannot be scientifically proven. The natural sciences make descriptive claims about the world. Whether a descriptive claim is true or false is an empirical question. On the other hand, ethical claims are prescriptive or normative. They deal with things as they ought to be, not with things as they are. We're all familiar with that, famous is-ought distinction. The natural sciences can describe historical atrocities like the Holocaust, but they cannot offer any evaluative judgments concerning such crimes against humanity. In fact, an exclusively scientific outlook cannot identify any given transgression as a crime against humanity because it cannot establish the intrinsic value of human beings. In the words of B.F. Skinner, science dehomunculizes man. Man who was once this being who was defended by the literatures of freedom and dignity is now dehomunculized and basically lowered to the level of base animality. Not surprisingly, Richard Dawkins, who believes that science alone can supply a tenable ethic, has argued that the demarcations between humans and animals are, in his words, quote, more fuzzy and less clear-cut, unquote. Most significantly, science itself cannot be scientifically proven. Science is replete with unverifiable assumptions. Again, science assumes that all sensory information provides a reliable portrait of external reality. Science also assumes that physical laws are ubiquitous and are applicable everywhere. Science assumes that there are perceptible regularities that one can expect to observe should the requisite conditions hold sway. None of these assumptions can be proven are accepted by most scientists. Now, these epistemic constraints notwithstanding, the universal competence of the natural sciences is upheld by the so-called shaman of scientism, and that was a neologism coined by Michael Shermer. when institutionally accredited science is fetishized by the shaman of scientism, when it's fetishized in this manner, there is a general tendency to assume that those theoreticians who have secured the blessing of the intelligentsia are good scientists, while their critics are anti-scientific. For instance, responding to his detractors on Face the Nation, Fauci stated, and I quote, "So it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science." That's dangerous. To me, that's more dangerous than the slings and arrows that get thrown at me. I'm not going to be around here forever, but science is going to be here forever. And if you damage science, you are doing something very detrimental to society long after I leave. And that's what I worry about, unquote. So essentially, Fauci was asserting that he was immutably virtuous because he was a representative of science. The assumption underpinning Fauci's soteriological elitism is that scientists are averted to irrationality, to venality, to immorality. Of course, if the theoreticians of institutionally accredited science are unquestionably virtuous, completely immune to corruption, then their opponents must be either ignorant or irredeemably corrupt. In fact, some scientists can even be elevated to the lofty status of saviors, while their critics qualify as veritable demons. Fauci expressed this sort of messianic conceit a little later into the same interview on Face the Nation when he said, and I quote, "I'm going to be saving lives, and they're," Fauci's critics, "going to be lying," unquote. Once more, humanity was partitioned off into antagonistic Manichaean categories, where the ancient Gnostic espoused the soteriological binary of the pneumatikoi and the psychikoi. The neo-Gnostic of scientism espouses the soteriological binary of the virtuous scientist and the anti-scientific atavist. Now, this sort of Messianism is exemplified by the case of Trofim Lysenko, the Soviet Union's leading authority in regards to genetics and agriculture. Now, calling Lysenko a geneticist is really an exercise in bad comedy. The man denied the existence of DNA. He denied the existence of chromosomes. He also rejected Mendelian genetics because it did not comport with Marxism. In accordance with Marxism, Lysenko asserted that environment was the sole determinant in the formation of biological life. Suitable stimuli and settings assured that animals and plants would adopt the necessary traits for survival and success. Biological life was infinitely malleable and could be encouraged to flourish under any number of circumstances. Lysenko claimed that he had managed to stimulate the germination of Soviet crops at various times of the year by saturating them in, of all things, freezing water. And this was among several other environmental cues that he subjected crops to. But if that weren't erroneous enough, Lysenko further claimed that subsequent generations of crops would recall these environmental cues and even bloom during the Russian winter. According to Lysenko, the same techniques be used to grow orange trees in, of all places, Siberia. Now, Lysenko's ideas were they supposedly upheld the universality of Marxist principles. So it comes as no real surprise that Lysenko excited Soviet leaders. With the enthusiastic support of Joseph Stalin, Lysenko launched a disastrous campaign to modernize Soviet agriculture, and millions of people were forced to participate in state-controlled farms, and predictably, widespread crop failures and famine ensued. But the case of Lysenko underscores the scientist's equal susceptibility to potential injurious influences. Lysenko spent his earlier years in abject poverty, and as a result, he became a true believer in the communist revolution. When Lysenko's scientific research did not comport with his Marxist convictions, he invariably chose to believe communism. Besides, hadn't communism been scientifically dignified by Charles Darwin? The binary of the fit and the unfit found socioeconomic expression in the struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Engels even used the term scientific socialism, Marxist theory. Thus, Lysenko surmised that biology would eventually reflect the reality of Marxism. Evidently, Lysenko, his distinction as a scientist did not immunize him against ideological biases. Now, of course, today, Lysenko is rightfully denounced as a pseudoscientist, and therefore it would be both fair and erroneous to assert that the Soviet agricultural debacle could be imputed to science. But it must be understood that Lysenko was regarded as an expert by his respective government. His findings were deemed scientific and as such were viewed as unassailable. More responsible geneticists questioned Lysenko's findings, but were slanderously portrayed as acts of, quote, mysticism, obscurantism, backwardness, unquote. All of these unflattering terms could easily be condensed to a single pejorative. And that pejorative is, of course, anti-scientific. The pejorative, this same pejorative, was applied with a troubling degree of elasticity during the pandemic. Legitimate scientists like Peter A. McCullough and Robert Malone were suddenly stigmatized as anti-scientific deceivers. The binary of the scientific, that is to say, the elect, and the anti-scientific, that is to say, the damned, defined the soteriological economy of a new secular theocracy. In this theocracy, a series of nonsensical practices like masking, social distancing, lockdowns, indiscriminate vaccination, all were regarded as virtually salvific. For instance, during a September 2021 speech delivered at the Christian Cultural Center in Brooklyn, New York, Governor Kathy Hochul exhorted congregants to become, quote unquote, her apostles and share the gospel of the COVID-19 vaccine. According to Hochul and her gospel, the vaccine was, in her words, quote, from God to us. Of course, one might ask what sort of gift from God would give its recipients myocarditis, pericarditis, blood clots, etc. According to a recent report released by Senator Ron Johnson as of April 25th, VAERS reported 38,607 deaths and more than 1.6 million, quote, adverse events worldwide associated with the administration of COVID-19 injections, unquote. Of the more than 38,000 deaths, the report said 5% occurred on day 0, day 1, or 2 following injection, compared to 2,663 deaths reported to VAERS associated with the flu vaccine over a period of 35 years. Nevertheless, the vaccine was imbued with soteriological value, and its proponents advanced the new Manichaean binary of the vaccinated, that is to say, the elect, it's the unvaccinated, that is to say, the damned. The religious trappings of this pandemic era theocracy were even more powerfully exemplified by the virtual canonization of Fauci, whose countenance was actually insinuated into familiar pieces of religious iconography. The so-called patron saint of Wuhan was featured on stickers and celebrity prayer candles. While some of these images were likely intended as exercises and harmless parody, others were quite serious exhibitions of religious veneration. For instance, James B. Meigs made the following observation, quote, in my charming little village in Westchester County, there is a charming little gift shop. In the shop's charming little window stands a display of bobblehead dolls. Unlike, say, an Elvis doll, figurines depicting the cast of Friends, these dolls aren't beat in the spirit of knowing irony. They are more like religious icons, ritual objects of liberal veneration. The dolls include the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has been posthumously reinvented as an avatar of legalistic girl power. Next to her wobbles the head of Vice President Kamala Harris, a figure whose elevation to secular sainthood appears to be a bit premature. Above those stands Dr. Anthony Fauci, the uncontested exemplar of all that is true and noble in today's liberal pantheon. Did I mention it is a very liberal town? Did I need to? I imagine the shop's customers bringing home their Fauci bobbleheads and placing them in positions of honor in their otherwise tchotchke-free homes. Henceforth, all who enter those households will be expected to stop and genuflect before good St. Fauci, unquote. Now, for more than just a few people, Fauci constituted a divine revelator of a new religion. Initially, it seems counterintuitive that such a theocracy could take shape within the predominantly secular cultural milieu of the West. However, Eric Voegelin defined secularism as a radical immanentism because through its rejection of God and a transcendent order, it creates a closed immanent frame wherein man can be virtually apotheosized, venerated as a god. Thus, secularism enthrones man as this immanent deity. Such is the case with Fauci and other closely aligned Covidian technocrats, the veritable Wellesian samurai of the modern age, who became the gods of an emergent neo-Gnostic faith. This Covidian iteration of a radical immanentism was hardly a theological novelty. Arguably, it was a variant of Auguste Comte's religion of humanity. This exclusively immanentist faith represented the crescendo of a broader theological continuum, beginning with Sir Francis Bacon. Now, Sir Francis Bacon, he believed that history was defined by the growth and development of science and technology. Bacon supplanted Plato's philosopher kings, those who could discern the forms of social justice, with a technical elite who governed according to the principles of technical order and efficiency. Bacon advanced such a societal arrangement in his famous piece of science fiction literature, The New Atlantis, a subtly prescriptive piece of literature that presented us with a purely technocratic society. One of the core assumptions upon which the Baconian societal model was premised was the cosmos, that the cosmos was bereft of a telos, raison d'entrée, or end goal. Telos is the etymological root of the philosophical term teleology, which is the study of purposiveness in the universe. Teleology concerns itself with the purposes and ultimate ends of natural things. Bacon was among one of the first theoreticians who would expunge purposiveness and meaning from scientific studies. Though he certainly was not a scientist of great consequence, Bacon distinguished himself as the first great promoter, organizer, and propagandist of science with a capital S, as a perpetual. Before science was subjected to disteleological revisions, it was a quasi-spiritual contemplation of the essences and intrinsic purposes of things. It acknowledged purposiveness in the universe, in the cosmos. The discipline of science initially presupposed the intelligibility of the cosmos. Such a presupposition was well-founded because if the cosmos was not intelligible, then a scientist's efforts to understand the order, to apprehend it, would be futile. After all, the unintelligible remains immune to meaningful study and apprehension. If unintelligibility were a ubiquitous feature of the universe, then the interpretive instruments of science would be rendered useless. A disteleological cosmos would possess no meaning. Instead, a disteleological cosmos would be, by definition, meaningless. Ironically, the discernment of meaning meaning of the natural order's various mechanisms is a chief vocation of science. Nevertheless, Bacon believed that nature could be forced to reveal her secrets through systematic experimentation once teleology was completely jettisoned, once it was rejected. And this rejection would significantly alter the ends towards which many scientific enterprises were directed. To understand the ramifications of teleology's exile from science, one must first understand the relationship between science and metaphysics. Metaphysics is prior to science. Errant metaphysical propositions typically presage science going awry. When raw scientific data is decoupled from a legitimate metaphysical framework, ideologies are given carte blanche. Bacon's rejection of a telos, of teleology, in favor of a mechanical interpretation of nature was the metaphysical error that gave rise to much of the misguided science witnessed by the 20th and 21st century. Naturally, the rejection of teleology would change the metaphysical framework guiding scientific research. In the case of Bacon, that rejected him to enshrine a metaphysical framework that a mechanistic view of nature. In turn, this view probably stemmed from certain ideological biases Bacon imbibed within more esoteric quarters. According to Michael Howard, Bacon was a member of a secret society called the Order of the Helmet. The organization's name was inspired by Auguste, who was portrayed wearing a helmet. The order's rather fetishized of wisdom echoed the conception of Sophia, who represented an agent of gnosis. Appropriately enough, Bacon was a student of Hermetic, Gnostic, and Neoplatonist philosophy and had also studied the Kabbalah. All of these schools of occultism proffered their own iterations of gnosis. Allegedly, Bacon was also a Grand Master of the secret Rosicrucian order, which was closely associated with Freemasonry. When Bacon published the New Atlantis, the book was adorned with Masonic symbols such as the compass and square, the two pillars of Solomon's temple, and the blazing triangle and the eye of God, which suggests his association with secret societies that subscribe to his utopian concepts. These occult inspirations, particularly Masonry, become significant when one domineering and tacitly docetistic, or that is matter-loathing attitude towards nature. The Italian humanist who would eventually co-opt the operative Mason guilds in the late 1500s transposed the concept of gnosis into the immanent sphere. And this transposition redefined gnosis as a secret knowledge of how to master the blind forces of nature for a sociopolitical purpose. Mastering nature for sociopolitical purposes was precisely what Bacon had in mind. Establishing dominion over nature entailed the rejection of a telos. Now, Bacon insisted that all study of the purposes of natural things be confined to theology. It had no place in science. Bacon contended that this relegation would allow for the imposition of man's will upon the raw material of nature, which could be best understood according. At any rate, modern science was redefined as an unrestrained pursuit of technical power over nature. The material of nature could be best understood as nothing more than particles and elements. And in the wake of teleology's unceremonious ouster, there arose an inability among scientific thinkers to distinguish between order and disorder. Although reason was ostensibly elevated to deific status, it was actually subordinated to various appetites. Ethical sensitivity was soon eclipsed by technical aptitude. Efficiency became the metric by which normative societal principles were determined. Meanwhile, disillusionment began to beset humanity. Reason became a servant of disordered and diseased impulses, while ethical considerations were subordinated to the quest for technical prowess. Where the ancient Gnostic would conflate these ontic evils with creation itself, the Baconian Gnostic would seek to drive them from nature through systematic experimentation. Yet the objective was never nature's restoration, but her placement in Bacon's words, in the rack, placing nature in the rack. Thus, Bacon's single-minded pursuit of technical prowess probably exacerbated man's previously existing disenchantment. Man no longer endeavors to understand the cosmos, but he seeks instead to control it. While the technocrat has tacitly proclaimed himself God by virtue of his scientific knowledge, the universe continues to resist his efforts to subjugate it. Nevertheless, Bacon's scientific humanitarianism was eventually consecrated by the academics and adopted by oligarchic forces as the hermeneutical key for unlocking nature's secrets. Chief among these forces were the Defense Department technocrats, whose militaristic prerogatives have been and continue to be important to Bacon's scientific pragmatism. When one sees things like the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, we all remember that from the 80s, or the High Frequency Oral Research Program, or one is seen a Baconian quest on the part of the military establishment. The pretext for that quest is securing democracy. Ironically, the technocratic principles upon which the Baconian outlook rests are inimical to democracy. Policy sciences author Frank Fisher contends that the work of Henri de Saint-Simon can be interpreted as a prescription for Bacon's prophecy. So we move from Sir Francis Bacon to Henri de Saint-Simon, whose work was interpreted as the prescription for Bacon's New Atlantis prophetic vision. This 18th century French utopian, Henri de Saint-Simon, he advanced what he called a quote-unquote new Christianity, which offered quote-unquote morality without metaphysics and quote-unquote technology without theology. As is made painfully obvious by his rejection of metaphysics, Saint-Simon's Christianity did not acknowledge any transcendent reality, and the absence of that reality, no other soteriological concern apart from the collective good. Social ills, not the disordered human will, became the sources of all evil. Essentially, Saint-Simon projected evil outside of the intangible will and superimposed it upon the tangible world. That sort of concretization of evil smacks of Gnosticism. Not surprisingly, Saint-Simon quote, resemble heretical Christian sects of the past, unquote. This new Christianity, which was a derivative of the very heresies that challenged Orthodox Christianity, would supposedly reorganize society to help the poor. Now, to understand the reorganized society envisaged by this new Christianity, one must understand Saint-Simon's surrogate for supramundane God. By substituting technology for theology, Saint-Simon imbued automation with salvific qualities. According to this new faith, the existing ideological disparities would be banished by science. The divine would no longer be rendered intelligible by priest, but by scientist, since materiality had been enshrined as the sole reality. Scientists possessed the requisite gnosis to understand the intramundane divinity from which materiality arose. Meanwhile, the processes of governance would no longer be administered by administrated by politicians, but by technicians. Since the mechanistic view of the cosmos held sway, it stood to reason that that society was nothing more than a machine, and as such could be operators who possessed gnosis concerning such operating systems. Saint Simon sought to replace competing political interest with expert management in a governmental arrangement he dubbed the administrative state. While this appellation, the administrative state, sounds rather mundane, a closer extension of Saint Simon's administrative chief among them is the belief that human reason incarnates the divine. At least that would be the case for the scientists and technicians who constituted Saint Simon's secular priesthood. One could argue that Saint Simon was little more than a neo-Gnostic theocrat who declared a scientific faith to post-revolutionary France. In fact, Librarian of Congress James A. Billington describes Saint Simon as, quote, John the Baptist of revolutionary ideology, crying out in the wilderness of the Napoleonic Restoration eras for new historicism and moral relativism, unquote. Saint Simon's mission was a religious one. He had experienced the tumult of the French Revolution, and from experiencing that, Saint Simon was painfully acquainted with the chaos that stems from institutional religion's complete and total ouster. He realized that the amputation of the church from the state was analogous to the removal of the soul from the body. The soulless state was an indiscriminate murderer, as is evidenced by the government of revolutionary France. So he believed that you couldn't really amputate the church from the state. But the irony is that in hopes of subduing the fires of revolution, Simon actually provided the theoretical basis for the most destructive revolution of them all. Saint Simon hoped to bring an end to revolution by promoting a science of human relations. Saint Simon drew upon the radical empiricism of Tracy and extended that radical epistemology into the new field of social relations. And in so doing, he enshrined a strictly quantitative approach to governance. Arguably, this epistemology of governance would constitute a new gnosis for the aspiring elites of the subsequent centuries. Suddenly, science promised explanatory unity concerning human relations. Those in possession of this gnosis only needed to apply the proper economic and social stimuli to induce desirable mass behaviors. Saint Simon applied the scientific method to the body of society and analyzed it according to its physiological components. Class. This functional class analysis presaged Marxist class theory, which presented the eschatological hope of a classless socialist utopia. A defining feature of this secularized Eden was the absence of social distinctions, just as the Gnostics believed that ontological distinctions were symptomatic of matters corrupting that social distinctions bodied forth evil. Arguably, the collectivism, that political doctrine, represents the transposition of Gnosticism's normative monism into the body politic. While Gnostic cosmology was marked by radical metaphysical dualism, the Gnostics' normative conviction was that the division of spirit and matter, that division should never have existed. Instead, reality should have undifferentiated spiritual order. Salvation was escape from the confining world of matter and restoration to fullness, that is to say, the pleroma, through gnosis. Resituated in the context of political science, this eschatological hope becomes the basis for collectivism. The apotheosized state qualifies as an immanentized pleroma, the immanentized fullness, eschatological and soteriological hopes. It's that pleroma is immanentized and assumes the form of where the individual is reabsorbed into the state, with all distinctions banished and the perfectly unified social body reconstituted, man can rediscover the divine human nature that an undifferentiated, or well, a differentiated social cosmos supposed obscured. The individual is an illusion. All must be one. This, of course, is collectivism. Of course, homogenizing humanity stipulates the expunging of cultural, religious, and socioeconomic distinctions. Herein is the rationale for the sort of state-sanctioned purges that were enacted in the Soviet Union and Soviet Russia, Communist, Khmer Rouge era Cambodia, and other socialist totalitarian regimes. Not surprisingly, E.H. Carr characterizes Saint Simon as, quote, the precursor of socialism, the precursor of technocrats, and the precursor of totalitarianism, unquote. But the quest for a civil religion that we see taking place with Henri de Saint-Simon and his New Christianity, that civil religion and a science of human religion with Saint-Simon's chief disciple, Auguste Comte. Building on the ideas of his predecessor, Comte advanced the development of a surrogate religion, an idea that Saint-Simon also contemplated. While Comte was raised in a devout Catholic family, the philosophical system he sought to develop would countenance none of Catholicism's metaphysical propositions. However, the new religion that Comte would eventually propose would integrate elements that vaguely echoed Catholicism. Where Saint-Simon proposed a new Christianity, Comte promoted the concept of a sociocracy, described as a new religion of humanity. Sociocracy would be enshrined through what Comte dubbed sociolatry. Sociolatry, as defined by Comte, involved a system of secularized sacraments and festivals. Comte believed that through this system of devotional rites, participants would consecrate themselves to humanity with a capital H. So it's a form of autotheism, apotheosized man. Man made a god, venerated as the great being. Divinized humanity incarnated itself as great historical figures. In fact, adherents of Comte's religion believed that all humans, dead and alive, comprised the grand being. Of course, the worship of humanity, whether you have it under the appellation of the grand being or some other designation, is nothing more than autotheism. With Comte's grand being, one discerns intimations of the Gnostic pleroma. Again, in an immanentized form. Like his Gnostic antecedents, Comte believed that the human essence once commingled with divine essence inside a singular deific power. In fact, Comte's grand being represented a far more radical formulation of autotheism because it was exclusively composed of the entire human race. Man did not simply exist in ontological union with the divine, but collectively constituted it as an apotheosized race. Within the framework of Comte's theocracy, the governing priesthood of this intramundane divinity would be social scientists, which of course Comte was the founder of sociology, which was a realization of Henri de Saint-Simon's hope to create a real science of human relations. But Comtean churches could be found throughout London and in other major cities, a fact that further underscores the impressive sphere of influence exerted by this scientistic religion. Like the bishop of an apostolic faith, Comte delivered sermons, officiated weddings, and performed funerals. Because Comte viewed humanity in toto as an immanent deity, as an intramundane divinity, it was only natural for him to endow man's cognitive endeavors with consonant sacrosanctity, upholding the characteristic scientism of his predecessor, Henri de Saint-Simon. Comte regarded science as a sort of gnosis that originated within the human mind. Thus, it was deemed an object of worship along with humanity. After all, it was reason that had systematized the various disciplines that collectively constitute the hermeneutical keys of science. In turn, that gnosis promised to unlock the secrets of the natural order, thereby allowing man to usurp powers. Chapels dedicated to this religion of humanity were built in Brazil and France. I think some of them are still standing too. Arguably, a variant of this secular religion recently emerged in the United States in the form of a Covidian sociocracy centered on the sacralized figure of Fauci. Thomas Huxley described Comte's reality as Catholicism minus Christianity because it attempted to establish ecclesiastical bodies, sacraments, rituals, moral values, all without appeals to God, to a transcendent God. The problem with such a faith is that any moral values it attempts to promote are unmoored from an ontological source. God are subjectively and perennially transient. That which was deemed a virtue today could easily become a vice tomorrow and vice versa. Moral values become nothing more than parameters potentially selected on the basis of nothing more than mere expedience. Such an ethic can be condensed to the Protagorean aphorism, man is the measure of all things. Invariably, this dictum is confronted by the question, which man? Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Mao Zedong, they were all men. So we're lost in our search for a tenable ontic referent. More importantly, who else was a man? Who else is a man? Fauci. How does this man of science adjudicate on moral questions? Like Comte, Fauci also espouses a form of Catholicism that is bereft of Christian theology. Catholicism minus Christianity. In a December 1st, 2023 interview with the BBC's Caddy K, Fauci stated that he no longer practices his Catholic faith. When he was asked why this was the case, Fauci replied, and I'll quote, a number of complicated reasons. First of all, I think my own personal ethics in life are, I think, enough to keep me going on the right path. And I think that there are enough negative aspects about the organizational church that you are very well aware of. I'm not against it. I identify myself as a Catholic. I was raised, I was baptized, I was confirmed, I was married into church. My children were baptized into church. But as for practicing it, it seems like a pro forma thing that I don't really need to do, unquote. Fascinatingly, this religious background, the religious background of Fauci, closely parallels the religious background of Comte. Like Comte, Fauci embraces a form of Catholicism minus Christianity. He identifies as a Catholic while simultaneously embracing his own personal ethics as he puts it, the right path. Yet, was Fauci following the right path when he lied to Congress about NIH funding gain of function research in Wuhan at the Wuhan lab, a revelation that has been exploited in an effort hostilities between China and the US? Was he on the right path when he attempted to discredit the lab leak theory, which is likely true in light of the overwhelming evidence? Was he following the right path when he engaged in official communications via personal email in order to circumvent Freedom of Information Act request? Was he following the right path when he advocated unconstitutional vaccine mandates that cost tens of thousands of people their jobs? Was he following the right path when he revised estimates for achieving herd immunity on the basis of polling data instead of a strictly scientific rationale? If a man like Fauci is the measure of all things, then there can be little wonder why the American sociocracy that exalted him was a veritable hell on earth. Now, what I have just described for you all is an American sociocracy, which was erected in plain sight for years. It began on March 11th, 2020, with the World Health Organization's declaration of a pandemic. Its reign ended on May 5th, 2023, when the WHO declared the end of the public health emergency. Even now, 2 years removed from its complete dominance in America and abroad, its influence is still felt. This sociocracy and the process of its construction, however, have been obscured by a collection of cover-up artists that the public has become all too familiar with. Concealment began in 2021 with the creation of the COVID crisis group, originally called the COVID Commission Planning Group. This collection of elite anointed experts was the product of 4 tax-exempt foundations: the Schmidt Futures, the Skoll Foundation, Stand Together, and the Rockefeller Foundation. Such foundations serve oligarchical interests by providing the powerful with tax havens, tax-exempt havens, and by engaging in social engineering, all under the guise of philanthropy. A June 6, 2021 New York Times article by Cheryl Gay Stolberg states that the COVID crisis group, quote, grew out of a telephone call October from Eric Schmidt, the philanthropist and former chief executive of Google, to Philip D. Zelikow, who was the executive director of the commission that investigated September 11th, unquote. The name Zelikow should give one pause. In addition to being the 9/11 Commission's executive director, Zelikow was the chief writer of the 9/11 Commission report. The commission itself was a political farce. In 2000, commission's chairman, Thomas Keane, and another commission participant, Lee Hamilton, admitted that their investigation was, quote unquote, set up to fail. One of the failures is the report's denial of the fact that hijackers Khalid al-Midhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were recipients of Saudi embassy money. Further investigation into this fact would have revealed that people for the 9/11 attacks were protected by individuals inside the American intelligence community. These individuals included Richard Blee and Tom Wilshire of the CIA's Bin Laden unit and Dina Corsi of the FBI. As the principal writer of the 9/11 Commission report, Zelikow must take much to the blame for the impression of these and other important facts. Zelikow became director of the COVID crisis group. This, of course, begs the question, did Zelikow again play the role of cover-up artist, this time in the case of COVID? Zelikow characterized Republican efforts to examine the lab leak theory as a quote-unquote political blame game. However, animal samples taken by Chinese government authorities from Wuhan wet markets failed to provide any evidence that wildlife around the lab were infected by SARS-CoV-2 virus. This fact, of course, strengthened the possibility that the lab research was the source of COVID. Proponents of this proposition include economists Jeffrey Sachs and Neil Harrison, a Columbia University professor of molecular pharmacology and therapeutics. In support of their contention, Sachs and Harrison point to a sequence of 8 amino acids located on an important part of COVID's spike protein. This sequence is identical to one found in cells that lined human airways. Now, opposing this contention was Dr. Peter Daszak, a British American disease ecologist who ran EcoHealth Alliance, a non-governmental organization that many believe to have funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. Dr. Andrew Huff, a Iraq war veteran and an infectious disease epidemiologist who worked for EcoHealth Alliance, claims that one of his first assignments at EcoHealth Alliance was reviewing a proposal for the National Institute of Health entitled Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence. The proposal was authored by Peter Daszak and Xi Zhengli, a Chinese virologist at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who researches SARS-like coronaviruses of bat origin. The proposal called for a two-phase research project. Phase one started in 2014 and received a budget of $3.7 million. It involved surveillance of bat coronaviruses and the cataloging of bat coronaviruses found in the wild. Phase one concluded in 2019. Phase two was described in a April 28th, 2020 Newsweek article entitled Dr. Fauci backed controversial Wuhan lab with US dollars for risky coronavirus research. This article states, quote, a second phase of the project beginning that year include additional surveillance work, but also gain-of-function research for the purpose of understanding how bat coronaviruses could mutate to attack humans, unquote. The Newsweek article continues, quote, the project was ran by EcoHealth Alliance, a nonprofit research group under the direction of President Daszak, an expert on disease ecology. NIH canceled the project just this past Friday, April 24th, Politico reported. Daszak did not immediately respond to Newsweek requests for comment. The project proposal states, we will use S-protein sequence data, infectious clone technology, in vitro and in vivo infection experiments, and analysis of receptor binding to test the hypothesis that percent divergence thresholds in S protein sequence predict spillover potential. In layman's terms, spillover potential refers to the ability of a virus to jump from animals to humans, which requires that the virus be able to attach to receptors in the cells of humans. SARS-CoV-2, for instance, is adept at binding to ACE2 receptor in human lungs and other organs. According to Richard Ebright, an infectious disease expert at Rutgers University, project's description refers to experiments that would enhance the ability of bat coronavirus to infect human cells and laboratory animals using techniques of genetic engineering. In the wake of the pandemic, that is a noteworthy detail, unquote. For many of a right-wing orientation, the more right-of-center political orientation, this them proves the culprit behind the COVID-19 operation. China, however, appears to be little more than a limited hangout or a scapegoat meant to be sacrificed when damaging revelations of the COVID operation began. On January 12, 2022, Huff revealed that Daszak had confessed to working for the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Huff also expressed his belief that Huff was a, quote, CIA front organization, unquote. In a series of January 12, 2022 Twitter postings, Huff wrote, and I quote, for the record, in 2015, Dr. Peter Daszak stopped me as we were leaving work late at night and asked me if he should work with the CIA. I was shocked given my experience in security. Over the next 2 months, he gave me updates on 3 occasions about his work with the CIA. When he asked me the question, I stated, Peter, it never hurts to talk with them, and there could potentially be money in it. Then over the next 2 months at the break area while getting coffee or between meeting, he stated that they were interested in the places we were working, the people involved, the data that we were collecting, and that work with them was proceeding, unquote. Huff also tweeted the following. He tweeted, quote, looking back, I now believe that EcoHealth Alliance was a CIA front organization to collect viral samples and to collect intelligence on foreign laboratory capacity. There was no way that the data collected or the models being developed could predict transmission or pandemics. Contextually, EcoHealth was barely solvent, in place to lay off employees with the ebb and flow of federal private funding. Peter would do anything or say anything to obtain funding. Intelligence organizations often target people in financial distress, unquote. Huff's most explosive assertion was as follows, quote, I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA/IC, or intelligence community, orchestrated the COVID cover-up, acting as an intermediary between Fauci, Collins, Daszak, Barrick, and many others. At best, it was the biggest criminal conspiracy in U.S. history by bureaucrats or political appointees, unquote. Huff's allegations of collaboration between Fauci and the CIA are significant, especially when one considers a September 26, 2023 letter sent by Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic to Christy A. Grimm, the Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The letter requests information regarding an allegation that Dr. Fauci was secretly escorted to the CIA headquarters. The letter states, and I quote, according to information gathered by the Select Subcommittee, Dr. Anthony Fauci, then director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious, played a role in the Central Intelligence Agency's review of the origins of COVID-19. The information provided suggests that Dr. Fauci was escorted into the Central Intelligence Agency CIA headquarters without a record of entry and participated in the analysis to influence the agency's review, unquote. The significance of Fauci's involvement with the CIA becomes even more pronounced. One considers the intimate relationship between World War II era social scientists and the agency's precursor, the Office of Strategic Services, or the OSS. Lester Ward, who is considered the founder of American sociology, believed that the social sciences were far more than a fact-gathering enterprise. He contended that, quote, its goal is a radical sociocracy, not the palliatives that pass for social reform, unquote. This vision began to tangibly enact itself with the OSS, which was heavily populated by prominent social scientists. Basically, the OSS plagiarized Nazi psychological war techniques for the purposes of securing ideological victory over America's competitors. William Wild Bill Donovan, who was the director of the Office of Strategic Services in 1941, believed that the Nazi psychological methods could act as models for Americanized strategies. Psychological warfare swiftly became part of the U.S. intelligence community's operational lexicon. Donovan believed that the concept was so significant that it would be inevitably, it would become a full arm of the U.S. military, equal in status to the Army, Navy, and Air Force. 6 organizations constituted the nucleus of U.S. psychological warfare research. These were Daniel Stouffer's research of the U.S. Army's Division Morale, the Office of War Information, or the OWI, led by Elmer Davis, and its surveys under Wilson, the Ecological War Division, WD, U.S. Army, commanded by Brigadier General Robert McClure, the Strategic Services, of course, OSS, led by William Donovan, Rensis Eckert's Division of Program Space at the Department of Agriculture, which, of course, provided research personnel in the United States for OWI, Treasury Department, other agencies, and Harold Laswell's War Communication Division at the Library of Congress. In some instances, the same social scientists participated in 2 or more organizations. Howard Becker of the University of Wisconsin, Douglas Cater of the Aspen Institute, Walter Linger, University of Wisconsin, Alex, sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, Inclesis of Harvard, Herbert Marcuse, the New School for Social Research, were all prominent OSS officers who would later contribute to the social sciences. However, OSS support extended well beyond governmental channels. It was many influential positions within tax-exempt foundations came to also be occupied by the OSS social scientists. Charles Dollard became president of Carnegie. Donald Young shifted from the presidency of the SRCC, or Social Science Research Council, to the Russell Sage, where he ultimately recruited Leonard Cottrell. Leland Deviney went from Harvard, Rockefeller Foundation, William McPeak, to set up the Ford Foundation and became its vice president. W. Parker Maudlin became the vice president of the Population Council. The later Lyle Spencer of Science Research Associates endowed a foundation that currently supports a substantial body of social science research. Meanwhile, social engineers, the social scientists, were also silently co-opting the mass media. Former members of the OWI became the publishers of Time, Look, Fortune, several dailies, editors of magazines like Holiday, Cornet, Parade, the Saturday Review, editors of the Denver Post, New Orleans, and others. The heads of the Viking Press, Harper and Brothers, Strauss and Young, two Hollywood Oscar winners, a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, the board of chairman of CBS, and a dozen key network executives, President Eisenhower's chief speechwriter, the editor of Reader's Digest International editions, at least 6 partners of large advertising agencies, and a dozen other noted social scientists. The social scientists just diffused themselves throughout the body politic, throughout tax-exempt foundations, and throughout the mass media. Now, of course, social scientists comprised the priesthood that was supposed to preside over Comte's hypothetical theocratic order, the Comtean sociocracy. While such a theocratic order was never fully realized in Comte's lifetime, a variant of it seems to have assumed embryonic form during World War II, and that embryo blossomed forth as a fully functional American sociocracy during the Covidian era of human history. At the heart of its ecclesiology was Dr. Anthony Fauci, the high priest of a new technocratic Eden. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Phil. Yeah, there's a lot in there, man.
Yeah.
And I guess is this something that you've also published, this composition here, or like are people able
No,
to? No?
I haven't. Now, some of the information appears in our first book, The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. We cite extensively Christopher Simpson and his work over psychological warfare and the diffusion of social scientists throughout mass media and tax-exempt foundations,
Okay.
and the exposition concerning and sociocracy and the continuum from Ben to Henri or to Comte is in both books, both Invoking the Beyond and The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship.
Cool. Yeah.
But no article yet.
All right. All right. Work in progress. But this was good. This is a good start. And it brought to mind
Oh, well,
my research as well in terms of the de-Christianization of Quebec. The thing that caught my eye in a lot of my research on the Rhodes Scholars that had infiltrated and sort of taken control of the levers of culture and influence of Canada over the 20th century was the figure of Georges-Henri Lévesque, who is a Dominican priest who is today known as the father of social science. And he was part of this
Interesting.
yeah, and he had a network of young boys, as they often do, talented young sociopaths that they accumulate around them, one of whom was Pierre Elliott Trudeau in the 1950s. A number of them were high-level Paul Guérin-Lajoie, who goes on to create the entire like reform of education, brings it, enforces in things like Darwinism, transforming it from a theory into a secular sort of
A veritable metaphysics. Yeah.
yeah. All that stuff happened in the 60s under this guy's lead,
Yeah.
and
You
what
know
I
what's also, oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was
Yeah.
going to say in reading a lot of their original reports that justified the overhaul of Canadian science funding was this idea that the social sciences and humanities have to be brought into a level of not only equivalence, but even superiority to the hard sciences that were formerly defined
Yes.
science, which was about discovery, invention, solving problems in the real universe. They said, no, that's the old wisdom. We have to replace that with the new wisdom, which is to find ways to mathematize humankind, basically, and now have that define the funding of what became our priorities in scientific planning into schools and other things. So it's just like all of what you were saying was bringing in a lot of the thoughts that I haven't had for a number of years. So I appreciate that a
Yeah.
lot.
You know what's also interesting with the involvement of social scientists in the conscious direction of society, and this actually relates back to my previous presentation over the Gnostic elements of modern ufology. Um, so William Sims Bainbridge, are you familiar with William Sims Bainbridge?
Yeah, the name's come across my research. Why do I know this name?
Yeah.
Evil.
He's
I
a
can remember evil.
yeah, he's a sociologist and a transhumanist, best way to characterize him, because he's very, very sympathetic towards transhumanism. But William Sims Bainbridge has basically endorsed the skilled creation of a new religion, which he calls the Church of the God Galactic, and he believes that this religion will come about when social scientists uh, engage in active experimentation, not just passive observation, but active experimentation with cults. Among them, of course, it was the Process Church, the satanic cult, the Process Church, and then he also endorses the active experimentation with UFO cults. And interestingly enough, he refers to the new role of social scientists as quote unquote religious engineers, men who are actually actively creating new religions. And interestingly enough, the Heaven's Gate UFO cult, which was deeply tinctured by Gnosticism, and of course was basically suicided itself, was being actually participated in by a social scientist by the name of Robert Bouch, who actually acted as a pamphleteer for the Heaven's Gate cult. So one must wonder if these religious engineers are not already working with UFO cults, with satanic cults, cults in general.
That's fascinating. And yeah, the new
Yes.
documentary that I'm working on is the Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, episode 5. And it's challenging to deal with this script, but I'm going to need to talk to you because the whole thing is
Oh,
going to be on UFO cults. So
absolutely.
yeah, we're going
Sure.
to talk more about this, and that's important. Okay, so I'm going to just pull back for a moment and go to a couple of questions from the audience. Um, Stephen has a question. Then I think I noticed there was a question earlier from Elisa, I believe. So let me just go with Stephen first, and then let me find Elisa's question. Stephen.
Okay, thanks. I hope you can hear me. I'm doing it from my phone poolside.
Yep.
Okay, super. Phil, absolutely fantastic lecture. So enjoyed it. Very
Oh,
thought-provoking.
thank you.
Yeah, really, really loved it. So appreciate the time you put into that. If I can kind of focus on something towards the end of it when you're describing all the social scientists from the OSS that permeated throughout society, And this kind of makes me think Mockingbird. And when I think of the scientism, the H.G. Wells type thinking, repetitive narrative to try to deceive the masses, is there an argument to be made that there's a parallel here between that and the psychic driving technique of MK Ultra, and that they're kind of scaling up the idea that they can program people, that they can program societies to believe what they want to be true?
I believe there's a compelling argument to be made with that, especially when you consider like the Human Ecology Fund, which was part of that broader MK Ultra infrastructure, and they actually entertained some of the most arcane of phenomena. They were working with fortune tellers, with witch doctors. They actually sent some of their people over to work with witch doctors. And they also, if I'm not mistaken, the Human Ecology Fund financed the publication of one of B.F. Skinner's books. I think it was Beyond Freedom and Dignity. I could be, or was it Walden 2? I can't recall. But they actually financed B.F. Skinner's work, which, of course, B.F. Skinner, his view of science, or Skinnerian science, seeks to dehomunculize man, to divest man of that troublesome ghost of the soul, and just lower him again to the level of base animality, just a reactive animal that can be conditioned. And in so doing, you can engender the desirable behaviors. As a matter of fact, I think in one of his works, B.F. Skinner said that his inner monologue often screamed, behave as you ought," when he was working with his test subjects. But yeah, I believe that there's a compelling argument to be made for what you're suggesting. Certainly something else to look into.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the note as well of just because it's like it's painful to hear the word itself, science, just being bandied about, by these guys. And it's like when you look at the real discoverers who discovered God's creation and translated that into making life better for people, they all had these were the real scientists, and they were potent, their minds were potent, they were making discoveries, they realized that there was something universal in their mind. They weren't elitists. They saw that there was something that was contained in the spark of everybody. And they were and so when I think of science, I think of potency. But when I think of the type of fake science that's being promulgated by these followers of Bacon, the behavior school of Skinner, and all of these creatures, they're like, it's an impotent science. It's a fake pseudo impotent science that destroys your ability, if you follow their method, to make discoveries. So we need like a new word somehow.
Yes. It does. It requires some sort of pejorative. The best way I can, the closest thing that I could ascribe to it is neo-Gnostic scientism, the fetishization of science, and it would be neo-Gnostic in that, of course, it treats scientific knowledge as a veritable gnosis to be grasped by an elite few. There we have that epistemic elitism again, but it's also like its ancient antecedent with ancient Gnosticism. It's actually devolved into this allergy towards matter, and that's probably because it seems counterintuitive, because ancient Gnosticism was matter loathing, or docetistic. It had this docetistic cosmological attitude where all of reality was regarded as an ontological simulacrum. It was just less than real. And then, of course, Baconian science elevated matter to the status of sole reality, but both regard reality with derision, as is evidenced by Bacon's divestiture of matter, of a telos, of a raison d'entrée, of purposiveness, thereby reducing it to nothing more than Bestand, or standing reserve of malleable material, to be molded But I think that the core dialectical commonality that you have between ancient Gnosticism and modern scientism, or Baconian, the Baconian formulation of science, is dysteleology, regarding everything as accidental, no purposiveness in the cosmos whatsoever. The Gnostics regarded it as a cosmic accident, as a cosmic abortion, and the modern Baconian scientists regard it as accident. And that I think that is why you see there's no real advancement, no real scientific advancement, no advancement to human knowledge within this paradigm, because what else is matter but just clay, just a malleable material. And now it's mutating further, this pronounced allergy towards matter with the groups such as movements such as transhumanism, which regard biological physical embodiment as nothing more than an impediment, and chips are our destiny. We are to be translated into this digitized pleroma through the singularity, which is just their iteration of kind of a techno rapture doctrine.
Yeah, exactly. And I could just keep on turning back, but here, before I throw any of my own thoughts into this mix here, I got Elisa, who had a question. So Elisa, go for it.
Oh, this is just my curiosity. I just because I had read about the World Military Games that happened in the summer and fall of 2019, and I was wondering if that played any role in the start of COVID, or if that was a propaganda exercise. I teach piano lessons, and I teach piano to. There's a lot of families in Vancouver that live part-time in Canada and part-time in China. And so they were saying to me that from their perspective, being Chinese, that the COVID started by American soldiers being in Wuhan at the time. And if there was a role that the World Military Games played in the kickoff to COVID.
I've heard about that, but I haven't had any opportunity to explore it in any meaningful depth. But it's certainly something that I think, especially if I eventually expand the presentation into maybe a broader article or book, it's something I intend to look into much deeper, much deeper.
Yeah. I'm not a.
I would like to. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm not a journalist or anything, so I don't have anything there. But it just seems to me like, as someone who's eager for the truth, no matter where it falls, it's possible that COVID was planted on Wuhan by more powerful figures.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And that's something that I want to, I hope I touched upon it sufficiently with the presentation. China, the revelations concerning Wuhan, gain of function research, all of this is being cynically exploited to stoke hostilities between the United States and China. And China really, China, if there's any role that's played by China, it's probably not the Chinese government. China, just the geography of China constitutes a limited hangout, a place where these dubious figures, mostly NIH, which is likely a CIA front, were doing their dirty business. And now that these revelations are coming to light, the Chinese will be insinuated in as the terrible leashers of the COVID menace. You'll kind of have like a redux of the yellow peril that you saw, in science fiction literature, the science fiction literature of the 50s. You remember, how science fiction literature presented Asiatic races as evil and what have you. That I think that a similar narrative is kind of being insinuated in with the recent COVID revelations.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had that touch of nuance there. That there's ultimately signs that this is an ultimate trap to corral people into a certain set of thoughts that would weaponize them ultimately for something very destructive. I know that for myself,
Yeah.
having read through and just processed like we all have as much information as humanly possible over the last 5 years on the topic, I found a lot of value in Denis Rancourt, Dr. Denis Rancourt in Ottawa, his research, as well as
Uh-huh.
J.J. Cui, another doctor, who both made very, very persuasive cases that the entire argument itself is a contrived ritual to create two sets of fallacies, both of which have different aspects of wrongness. I was thinking a little bit like the
Yeah.
phlogiston versus no phlogiston debate back in the
Yeah.
18th century, or
Yeah.
or yeah, where some people said, "Oh yeah, that thing in iron is phlogiston. That must be leaving the iron when it's getting rusted." And then other people would say, "No, no, no. There's no such thing." And they would try to keep. They were just very satisfied with the status quo of how things were, and they didn't like these innovators trying to introduce a new concept like phlogiston leaving the iron because it appears visually to be less than it was when it was before it was rusted. And both sides were wrong, and they were both destroying the ability of people like Lavoisier, these real, faithful, like real scientists, from actually introducing a discovery of the existence of oxygen, which was oxygenating and merging with the molecules of the iron. So that was being destroyed in the debate. And I find that there's probably something similar there that's been orchestrated with their program for getting a war with China. So again, I appreciate your nuance on that front.
Oh
Very much.
yeah, absolutely. And that you'll find is a standard tactic of the forces of oligarchy is promulgate a dialectic, a Hegelian dialectic, where you basically promote two ideational entities uh, that are ostensibly diametrically opposed, but in actuality, there is a dialectical commonality between them, and it intellectually neuters people every time. It's like, well, now it's the forces of the benevolent forces of the United States against the evil empire of the Soviet Union, or against now against those doggone commie Chinese. It's always the promotion of these dialectics, and like the antagonistic binaries that we saw during COVID. What was the one binary that was uh, and just absolutely disgusting? It was the binary of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and it destroyed everybody's ability to think and to think about things clearly.
Absolutely. Yep. Nikki had a thought. I can't read the whole thing on my screen though. So Nikki, do you want to share your thought based on what we just heard? If you're still there?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm like, I also have a loud dog that
Yeah, I'm
barks.
sorry about that.
No, you're good. No, I'm like, I can't do anything really. Okay. Thank you so much. This was so good. It was so well written. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it made me, just like Matt, it made me think about things that I had written in 2021, and was sort of working on. So, going to my comment, I just wanted to, I'll read my comment I wrote. They took God out of school, but replaced it with a new religion, the establishment narrative, and the religion of science, with forced masks, humiliation, and isolation rituals like social distancing and plastic dividers, keeping children afraid to touch one another, forced hand sanitizer, and belief in a system based on faith, a doctrine that you cannot question or else face ostracization, further isolation, job loss, loss of reputation capital, just to name a few.
You should have wrote my synopsis.
Yeah,
That encapsulates it. That encapsulates it pretty well. You notice the absolute dehumanization of it. Just, I mean, it's still, I have to kind of, uh, uh, bridle my tongue because it makes me so angry. But with the rhetoric, the just absolutely hateful, nearly neo-eugenical rhetoric that was being espoused, vaccinated. The language that was used concerning the unvaccinated paralleled much of the language that was used concerning, Jews in Nazi Germany. Oh, they're filthy, they're swimming in disease and what have you. Yeah, it was dehumanizing. I think that was the intended purpose, because again, this new science that we live under, the science that informs technocracy, dehomunculizes humanity, divests humanity of the soul, and just reduces us to nothing but animals.
Yeah, Richard just added, and the only salvation is the jab, which ironically, when
Yep.
laid on its side, resembles a crucifix. Maybe not a coincidence.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It's not interesting that Hochul, the governor of New York, likened herself to Christ, sending out her apostles with the jab, imbuing it with virtual soteriological value.
Yeah, interesting point, eh? Huh. Stephen pointed out that the name we might be looking for could be he's submitting narcissistic scientism. I like it. That could work. That could work, Stephen. That might be what we go with.
Good.
All right. Sue, I see your hand there. Digital hand. Go, Sue.
Hi. Thank you, Philip, for this really incredible, deep historical context in which to hold the sociocracy and technocracy. I was going to ask you, and so I was really happy to hear the nuanced perspective around the controlled opposition that Robert Malone and Brett Weinstein and Steve Kirsch first came out with about the Wuhan lab leak. I believed it for a little while, but I too follow JJ Couey, and he's just saying there's no way that mRNA can pandemic. It's a single. The whole thing is ludicrous on its face. So yeah, I did want to ask you about if there's a differentiation that you would draw between sociocracy and technocracy that we're seeing. So there's been a movement from seeing human beings as animals that can be conditioned to seeing human beings as machines, and this whole worshiping and religion of the machine, and how and the tech oligarch is working to establish a technocracy right now. I think if there's differentiation between them, or they're just one in the same. But
I'll tell you what I think, Sue, is if you think of church and state, the relational dynamic between church and state, which of course Henri de Saint-Simon, he believed that the separation between the two was deleterious, and that's what gave rise to the French Revolution, which he wouldn't necessarily be wrong about that. But Henri de Saint-Simon was imprisoned during the French Revolution, and that's why he was trying to concoct this new religion to bring an end to revolution, so that revolution didn't end in the tumult that he saw during the French Revolution. But with the relationship between church and state, that relational dynamic is also exists between sociocracy and technocracy. At least that's how I see it. Sociocracy is the church, technocracy is the state. Sociocracy promises to satiate the spiritual needs of man, even though those spiritual needs have been now reduced to a vulgar material understanding of the spiritual needs of man. And technocracy is the state, what basically presides over the administrative affairs of humanity. You make an excellent point about the anthropology, how we're moving from being regarded as animals to being regarded as machines. I think that that's part of the same continuum. Animals on the Baconian view would have been nothing more than machines. Organic life would be nothing more than mechanistic. And so it's only natural that we move from this view of humanity as nothing more than slightly elevated animality towards a machine, because for instance, transhumanists argue that we've always been mechanized, and that all we're doing is divesting ourselves of the biological hardware and moving towards the software, which is chips and everything. But yeah, I think it's part of the same continuum.
Great. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
All right. Inner council. Come on, you're all up. Or Mr. Council.
Hi there, Matt. Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's Wayne.
Hey, Wayne.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip. That's great. It's nice that people are still talking about this. The one thing, as I have the opportunity to talk about, is being a former knowledge manager, we generally look at where things are being done before in order to analyze and understand them with a bit more distance. And what I haven't heard many people talk about a lot is that the Spanish flu, which was also historically documented as coming out of emerging from American military bases. There was a Pfizer vaccine it was Pfizer who created the vaccine. In Encyclopedia Britannica, it documents it quite well. And between the editions, the 11th and the 13th edition, the statement or the 3 pages on it doesn't really change. Even the ingredients of the vaccination are given in Encyclopedia Britannica, and it does explain that there was almost an equal divide within the society at the time. Half the people believing that there was a flu or there was a pandemic, and an equal portion believing that it was actually the vaccine that was causing the symptoms within people. It was also historically documented that the virus wasn't isolated and identified until the 1930s. So that at the time, we know that they were operating without any knowledge of what it was that they were dealing with. And Pfizer had essentially patented a bacterium that they believed should be a solution for. And I haven't heard anybody kind of go back to the phenomenon that there's more than just this that resembles the cycle of social events that we're going through right now. And then delving into that, is it the same force behind it, or is it a model that's easy to replicate if you're looking for a certain preparation of result within the social fabric?
That's a good point, a good question, because I think it's just a tried and true model that's been used before. And interestingly enough, I brought up H.G. Wells earlier, and H.G. Wells' promotion of the samurai in his novel *The Modern Utopia*, and H.G. Wells, in his book *The Shape of Things to Come*, talks about the raid of the germs. And this raid of the germs is one of the precursors to the instantiation of the sort of technocratic world state that H.G. Wells wanted to see, take shape. And so I think it's an effective model that oligarchs have seized upon. Now, whether or not H.G. Wells is the one who tried the model, or H.G. Wells was just espousing the model that he in turn had been exposed to through his contact with oligarchical forces. I don't know. It's a chicken or egg, kind of a question there. But I think that it's a tried and true model, and it's tried. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was surprised looking into it that Pfizer is as old as it is. I thought it was a relatively newer institution, but when I looked into it, I think it was created in like the 1840s or something like that. It's been around for a long time.
Wow.
I'd be curious if anybody's done any good, competent research on the manipulation of science, medical science, especially with a focus on this very question, Wayne, that you raised. And I know that J.J. Cui has brought up most competently of anybody that I've seen the issue of bacteriophages and the politics of bacteriophage research, which when you go back to the 1890s to the 1930s, that was like Nobel Prizes were being passed. Like everything was on bacteriophages, it's like a species of bacteria that when you look at them under a strong microscope, it looks like what the images we're told of as viruses, the little icosahedral sort of structure. It sort of behaves exactly like we're told a virus is, but it's not a virus. It's a species of bacteria. And it's like everybody was doing this research. The military was doing research on this. And then it just kind of like phases out. It becomes like something that nobody pays attention to, at least in the public sector, from the 60s onward. And it seems like, based on the fact that, ivermectin, other forms of antibacterial medication and treatments seem to have a very good effect on whatever the hell it was that was spreading or that was pervasive. It implies that there's some bacteriological aspect to it. So J.J. Cui's point would be that it's not so much the modern, the sort of hegemonic standard model of what a virus is, which is fallacious, but rather this other school of or this other species that we should be looking more at. And I'd be curious again if anybody affiliated with Pfizer or the Rockefeller-funded medical machinery was doing that work, and if so, what would be that research? So I'm throwing that out there. If people have found competency, send it my way. I'd like to read about that, please. Just throwing it into the zeitgeist. Question. I got a question as well for you. In hearing you talk about Auguste Comte and his idea of the supreme being, or whatever it is, the great pseudo god, as being yeah, that one, as being the sum total of all humans that have ever existed and ever, I guess, can future exist. It reminds me a little bit of the type of narratives I'm hearing more and more around AI, the spiritualized AI as the sum total of all of our aspirations and imprints of everything that we desire and ever will desire, with maybe some time traveling aspect to it.
Yes.
Could you speak to that at all? Is that something that's caught your eye too?
It actually has caught my eye, and that's a continuum of thought that I want to look into. Especially with the hard AI theoreticians. I don't know who they've been reading, because I'm wondering if some of them are deeply influenced by Comte or other thinkers who came out of the positive paradigm of Comte. But it's very interesting that you bring that up, because that is what I've noticed, is that this belief that the sum total of the human race has this one singular deific power, this one organistic deity. And it's funny that you bring it up, because it's something that I'm very eager to learn about. So far I haven't found any transhumanist writings over Comte yet, but I'm there, because I'm pretty sure transhumanism is, it kind of stems from the positivist school of thinking.
Oh yeah. And could you define just quickly positivism? Could you quickly define
sure.
for those?
Yeah, positivism was the philosophy of Comte. Comte basically said that history and there's lots over this by Vogel as well in the New Science of Politics. Comte believed that history was divided into three phases. Interestingly enough, other humanist eschatologies have been divided into three phases. There's this bizarre, this bizarre preoccupation with the alleged triadicity of his. You find Joachim of Fiore also advanced it when he completely immanentized the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He said that there was the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit phases of history. Comte did the same thing. The early phase, the first phase is the theological, the superstitious, and then moves phase of humanity, and then from that into the positive phase of human history, where humanity through science and through the scientific method has managed to quantify everything and has gained positive knowledge of all things. Hence the term positivism. But yeah, positivism was his philosophical thought.
Would you say it's also like a rejection, implicit within this is a rejection of metaphysics as well?
Yes, absolutely. The first stage of human history and his three stages is metaphysical, and that's jettisoned. Complete jettisoning of metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
Which is likely a bequest to him through Henri de Saint-Simon of the Baconian rejection of metaphysics, because of course it was Bacon who completely rejected metaphysics, and interestingly enough, with the rejection of metaphysics, adopts a metaphysics, an errant metaphysics, but nonetheless, and that's why you have had so much bad science over the last few years, is because there's errant metaphysical presuppositions that animate scientific research, which purports to be, anti-metaphysical.
Mm-hmm. On that note, a few years back, I was reading through Bacon's New Organon that he wrote in like 1620, and there's something really disgusting but revealing. And I always find it very interesting when you have one of these alchemical Kabbalist mystics promoting systems of radical materialism, because you're like, there's something pretty disgenuine about you. Either you're stupid and you're inconsistent or you're being duplicitous and you're trying to create a fake school of thought to capture people's minds, right, in a little box. And he writes, as far as his rules of mind, saying that the understanding must not be allowed to jump and fly from particulars to remote axioms of almost the highest generality, taking stand upon them as if they were truths. The understanding must not therefore be supplied with wings, but rather hung with weights to keep it from leaping and flying. Now this has never yet been done. When it is done, we may entertain better hopes for science.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't want you to move beyond particularity to universals. You saw the same kind of problem with William of Ockham and his epistemology as well. Never a movement beyond beyond particularity, always remaining couched in particularity, never moving to universals, because that would be an acknowledgement of a transcendent order, which and that's something that their science that completely rejects. It cuts us off, severs us off from a transcendent order, thereby creating this closed immanent frame. But also, it allows them to view matter and the way they desire to view matter. It affirms their presupposition that matter is all there is, and matter with no purposiveness is malleable. It's the disteleological view. We remain in a world of matter, and matter is our toy, our plaything. You see that sort of mentality exemplified by the DoD technocrats who, cloud seeding, HARP, SDI, all of it is premised upon Bacon's scientific pragmatism. All of it's premised upon this assumption that matter is something for us to toy with, that it's based on.
Sue, I'm going to give you the last question before we wrap it up for today.
Oh, thank you. Well, just when you were talking about, what was it, the three phases of consciousness, Comte's?
Three phases of human history. Yeah, he segments it into phases. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just reading through Changing Images of Man, and they seem to integrate the human evolution of consciousness, which is embedded in a lot of the philosophy of New Age. But then I've also just been reading that so many of these techno-oligarchs were deeply into, especially the big three sci-fi writers, Asimov, and Heinlein, and Clarke, and they were all military-based and DARPA and, the whole deal.
Yep.
But I think that, didn't they weave in, I never read them, but they weave in this whole evolution of consciousness as well, so.
Yeah, especially Clarke. Clarke actually, and the interesting thing about Clarke is that some of his work he kind of tacitly asserts that he was exposed to Gnostic teachings, because he says that humanity is evolving to what he calls pure mentality, complete divesting of the flesh, complete divesting of the biological body, of physical embodiment, and a disembodied state of being. And he said that this was the religious doctrine of many ancient faiths, which to me kind of suggests that he was probably exposed to Gnosticism or Hermeticism or both. And yeah, you see that especially in a Clarke. But I'm sorry, I lost the train of thought there. What was your question again, Sue?
Oh, I just that all of this could date back to Comte, and so whether they're reading him directly, they're getting them vicariously. Both.
Yeah, I think that you're right about that. I think that's likely where they're getting that it's part of this broader continuum of thought, and errant theoretician building on errant theoretician building on errant theoretician, and that the game of telephone continues, and it's transmitted from antiquity into modernity that way.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this was a fun one. Thank you very much, Phil. And like I mentioned, Phil's books are going to be available in the description box under this video when it goes public. Everybody, thank you all for sharing this Sunday with us. And look, I think next Sunday what we'll do is Cynthia's class. Right, that's it. It's Cynthia's class next Sunday. The real American system versus the fallacies, the fallacious version of the American system, which is being sold today. Plus, before that, we'll do an episode of Pluralia Dialogos at 11 a.m. That'll be all next Sunday, 11 a.m. Dialogos, followed by the weekly class. And then in a few weeks' time, we're going to be doing a Francis Bacon, Francis Bacon will be appearing a lot in a sequence of lectures we'll be doing in all sorts of nonlinear ways. Jerry's going to be involved with that. I'm pretty excited. So stay tuned for more cooking the bacon, and we'll go from there. So thank you, Phil, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Great lecture. Fabulous.